The lost art of forgiveness. Why we don't forgive well in the West. I just asked Grok whether there's much research on the topic of forgiveness and trust. It said that there's a great deal. Interestingly, it stated that these two concepts are studied together because after indiscretion, forgiveness is essential for trust to be restored. It also stated that even when forgiveness is reached, it doesn't always lead to the full restoration of trust, and that behaviour change must also be observed. I agree, from my vast experience of being constantly underestimated and frequently taken advantage of. I've titled this article, Why We Don't Forgive Well in the West. And I write this from the perspective of a woman who was parented from the age of 1 by a single father and his mother, both incredibly emotionally stunted by war, post-war experiences and trauma in this life and multi-generationally, which turned them into very hurt, narcissistic people. This meant there was nothing and no one more important or powerful than them. My father was higher up on the hierarchy than my grandmother, and everyone else was underneath them. I was at the bottom of the hierarchy as the youngest and assumed to be the most broken, as I had no mother. I was told as much over and over again in my childhood. I was expected to turn into their weak, emotional punching bag. Perhaps this is why I can hide in plain sight now. I was taught to be that emotional crutch. And now that I no longer hold that energy, not one bit, I can still play the role of passive, quiet, and helpful, and be quite powerful underneath. I often feel as though I should come with a warning label, but as I work for the creating and not my own ego, I'm a fairly safe bet, as long as you're on the right side of the light-dark equation. How did I get here? You likely guessed correctly. I made myself into a master forgiver. Yes, I can swiftly step outside of my little S self and gain the perspective of the one hurting or attempting to hurt me in that same moment of hurt. This gives me power, as I expend nothing on defensive protection or counterbalancing a growing amount of wounding. Now it's 2026. In 2009, when I discovered why forgiveness was the key to fixing this shit, which was what I needed to do, I found it all kinds of difficult. I would spend hours giving my ego a hearing. I'd write it out. Sometimes I'd yell it out. Then when I realized there was nothing new coming forward, I would settle a little and ask another part of me, a wiser part, what do I need to think differently here? The answers came as they were logical and reasonable. Yet how was I going to implement the change? How was I to change my thoughts? Firstly, in my process, it took a huge amount of resistance. This built up an enormous amount of potential energy in my physical system, just like pulling a rubber band back further and further until it was either going to snap and hurt me or I would choose to let it go. While I was pulling that rubber band back tighter, my thoughts became more tense, and so did my body. I was taking an enormous toll on my nervous system, and the rest of my body became exhausted. I wanted this shit fixed more than I wanted anything. I had not made a promise to my greater self for no reason. So I wound myself up over and over again until I arrived at the point of no return. Would I launch into fuck it territory? Inevitably each time, I did. This links in to what I explained in my article series on nervous system dysregulation. Life is truly all about learning, and emotionally charged learning is very powerful. It can create and it can destroy. Today, I can't even feel the rubber band being pulled back. A few days ago, I'd been feeling a little tension increase during the day, but I didn't pay much attention to it. I used an app on my iPhone to help me drift off to sleep that night. It flashes the torch to encourage the left hemisphere to calm right down. As soon as I turned it on and closed my eyes, the light began flashing and I burst into tears. I had no idea why I was crying. It wasn't stopping, so I turned off my phone and I sat up. I allowed myself to speak it out. You don't know how much you hurt me. You were so awful. I saw you enjoying it. I still love you. I always have, always will. I wish I could stop. I want to trust you, but I can't. I listened to myself. I realized that something had finished and I just hadn't noticed the building of sadness within me. The next day, I had some realizations of what the feelings felt like from past experiences, and then I allowed some advice to come through to me from the unseen realms. I understood and I accepted what was being in these moments of life. These feelings were not triggered by me, but they were triggering me. I would not have felt the feelings and remembered a similar moment if there wasn't a little bit of resolution to be had. Of course, I forgave everything and everyone. What else is there to do in life? The elastic band is quiet now, rather stealth, but it still pulls back when it needs to. The resistance may be only slight inside my body today, but I have been humbled by my journey to get here. It's taken more dedication and commitment than I can explain. I can process my traumas without too much disruption to my everyday life, and now I can return to my peaceful, connected state of love and truth of the creating force of life. The question, what is the difference between the thick, solid, rather violent rubber band of 2010, 11 and 12, etc., and the quiet, slight pulling I can hardly recognize today? Why has it changed? What has changed within me, Joanna Ruth? I've built trust. I trust the process. I trust all agents and sections of the process as they are all needed parts of the creating force. I have years of proof of concept. I trust in the unseen realms of life. I no longer trust what is not worthy of trust. I require proof. This lack of trust is very common in the modern person. Regardless of our religions and cultures, our entire society lies to us. There is very little safety. In today's world, it's very clear how we as modern society's people are told to trust and also shown no evidence of the system and its agents being trustworthy. Today, I'm happy to trust those in the physical realms of life. Just show me repeatedly that you are a trustworthy entity, and I'll happily trust you. Otherwise, I will essentially expect you to be slightly untrustworthy, as it is with most people. Back to the question. Why was my rubber band of resistance so thick and solid? Why did I have no trust? My trust in relationships with other people was never built. I grew up in a family where everyone was being manipulated. Everyone was hurting everyone else and not caring about having done it. My father screamed. Oh, it was not pleasant. He was a volcanic Aquarian who was only ever going to see his own selfish perspective. As an adolescent, I had to learn to swear at him, to make him take notice of the truth. I would often have to yell over him just to get his attention. I would have to take my very peaceful state of being and find a way to push my frequency into his field and raise my voice and push the idea into him. He was a wall of fiery lava, and he burned anyone he wanted to, and then expected them to forget that he'd done it. As a young girl, I was frightened he would hurt my brother while he yelled into him some very violent words. He had people mesmerized, though. They did as he forced them to do, but they never knew he was doing it. Not me, though, not completely. He did have me fooled that I adored him and that he was doing the right thing most of the time. He was a nightmare. In my world, there was no protection for me. I only had me. There was no unseen realm. I only had me. I wasn't letting go. Let go. What would happen if I let go? I seriously feared for my life if I let anything go. I needed the protection of my ego. No one else was ever protecting me. It was my only way. I kept control of what I would let go of and mostly only suffered the learning of the intensity of my emotions previously hidden from me until 2018. That year was a year to remember. Until that turning point, I was so vulnerable that my ego had a tight hold on everything. I thought my way through every part of life and living it. I can sum it up now from a 2026 perspective. My ego would never have released its stronghold of complete control until I found faith. I realise, reading that sentence back, you're likely thinking I had a come to Jesus moment. Well, I'm Jewish. I did have a few moments, but I did it my way. 2018 saw a few huge events. Well, 2018 began actually in late 2017 for me. A person re-entered my life and it brought me many learning moments. I had spent what felt like a very long time, 2008 to 2018, working hard on forgiving and feeling my feelings and learning what other people's feelings felt like compared to my own. I had learned to forgive, not quite as a master forgiver, but I did it a lot with everything. In 2017, I had a series of small, rather mystical events which created a new beginning for me. I understand it much more clearly in hindsight. Back then, I was just going with the flow and not really understanding what was happening. Event 1. I randomly met a person I had not seen in at least 25 years. I was freshly 45 years old and he was 37. 25 years before, he was only a young teen, so he looked all grown up to me. I enjoyed the quick hello we had. Event 2. I returned home and promptly began having a voice in my thoughts, telling me to figure out why that meeting was important. I refused. I wanted to enjoy the niceness. I didn't want to ruin it by tearing it apart to find a lesson, as was my experience over the past 10 years. The voice in my thoughts made a bet with me. If she, the voice, could make him, the young man, turn up again in a day or two, just a quick connection, no chatting, then would I rewind the tape and figure it out? I agreed. I thought I might be able to get away with not doing the work, even if it was just the once. Event 3. No luck. I was walking home from yoga the next morning, and there he was, the young man. Except I mentioned to this voice in my thoughts, which I assumed was my mother, it was, that he won't notice me. I'm too far away. She says, "You'll have to call out." I refused, as I found it to be too needy. "Use your inside voice." I agreed to that because I wouldn't be embarrassed when none of it worked. Can you see my ego controlling everything here? Safe to say, I yelled out, but inside my head. He stopped in his tracks, which made me very excited because I had no idea anyone could hear me. I pointed to him as he had turned and looked precisely in my direction. He looked and recognized me, we waved, and kept walking. Event 4. I went home and figured it out, as promised. I was meant to understand the similarity of frequency between us that I had noticed, but not remembered that I'd felt it. It wasn't until much later that I realized how the entire series of experiences had taught me about faith and telepathy. Let's put it all into context. My mother got what she wanted, and I had learned things that I had not even recognized. That all happened at the end of November 2017. February 2018 brought the passing of my father by medical emergency. With that brought a huge alteration to my mind. With the threat of the volcano gone, I could actually see more truth. I wrote an entire album of songs in the 3 months after his passing, as I sat in the space he used to sit. I also began to want to speak and think about my mother. In watching myself keep bringing her up in conversation, I realized that my father had made a rule, a covenant, which everyone upheld. It was the very thing that kept me alone and unsupported. No one was to speak of my mother, not even me. It was never said that way, but it was that way. In 2018, on February the 4th, 1 week after my father had his 77th birthday, I instantly felt free at 9 a.m. to speak about my mother. I felt relief, but also a growing amount of frustration. I spoke of her, I thought about her, I spoke more and more to her. In having the freedom to do this, I also began to understand that I had no connection to the emotions I once felt. I couldn't feel them. I'd been trying to get to her love, to her peace, to her safety, her security, and I had the freedom, but I couldn't have what I wanted. All I had ever wanted was the emotions. By the middle of the year, I was very distraught about this. I tried to forgive everything I could think of, and it didn't change anything. So one day, I just decided the only person to ask was God, now called by me the Creating. Just like that. So I put my case forward. I spoke of what I'd been attempting. I admitted that I'm out of solutions. I needed help. Whatever it is I need to know or have to work with, please organize it for me and I'll stay on the lookout for it. Take advantage of it when it arrives. I spoke to God with a sense of no doubt, not one bit. It was just like putting in an order for a book at a bookshop and waiting for the call that tells you it's arrived. Faith had arrived in my life. It was because of the bet my mother made with me. the one I also lost after attempting to stay in the romance of the meeting. It showed me the power of what is mostly assumed in our society as coincidence, random, disorganized happenings. I knew better now. With that faith, I had trust. I had trust in the creating. Then came the solution. It was around a month later, and I saw an interview on YouTube, and I just felt as though I should buy that book. So I went to the bookshop and ordered it. I read it over 3 nights, and I knew that it gave me a gift. I wasn't sure what it was until a day or 2 later I realized, my little door. That is what I'd asked for when I spoke to the creating. I had asked for just a little doorway through this big wall I couldn't get past. This little book of poetry was full of poems about a child and his family in the first year of his life. In those poems, somehow, was the transmission that gave me back the emotions which belonged with my memories. Finally, I could hold her love again, her safety, her security, her beauty. That was another thing that helped me save my life. This was how I could then continue on to do some very important and intense healing, which I have continued to do to this day. I even ask for more elastic band moments so I can reach a clearer state. Without that faith I found, I would have never trusted enough to instruct my ego to let it go. It just wasn't happening until I found faith. Faith being the decision to suspend disbelief so that we are able to perceive the world without our ego's beliefs and expectations. Before losing the bet and then putting in the order for my little door and having all of that allow me to have a most beautiful connection to the creating force via my mother with all the love and safety it brought me, I wasn't going to heal my wounds. I must suggest to those of you who wish to return to those feelings of safety and security that you begin to suspend your disbelief. Loosen the grip little by little, just enough to allow the proof to be created. If you really want to know rather than understand, then you're going to have to do the tests. And you're going to have to create a level playing field to be assured of proof you can trust. Don't let your ego fool you. Take charge. You're an adult now. There is no one else to do it for you. We don't forgive well or very easily in the West because we don't trust yet. We don't even trust humans anymore. And they're the ones who are teaching us all we think we know. Hi, I'm Joanna Ruth from Tarot with JoannaRuth.Online. Hi, I'm Joanna Ruth, and this is your doorway to spiritual literacy. Why not come on in and learn some foundations together?